Strange Shadows, a Clark Ashton Smith podcast.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 26 of Strange Shadows, the Clark Ashton Smith podcast. We thought we'd round out the series with one last episode. We're going to have a bit of a rummage through the mailbag, I believe. I am one of your hosts, Rob Poynton.
And I'm the other one, Tim Mendes. Indeed, we are. We're going to be delving into correspondence this week, and it's going to be cribbed from loads of different sources because we tend to get messages on YouTube and Buzzsprout and Patreon and all over everywhere. So we've kind of collated things a little bit. Apologies if we have missed anything, because like we say, it is all over everywhere.
Yeah, if you do send in a question or a comment and we don't mention it, then do feel free to chase us up on it because, there's Discord as well and email.
Oh, I forgot about Discord.
When it comes to my Innsmouth stuff, I think I've got 4 email addresses. So it's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, it's great to get stuff in. And I think this season especially, we've had more comments than ever. So the audience is growing and it's great when we hear from people. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, and some of the correspondence we've had is some nice little topics that we can chew over a little bit. So we thought it was better to dedicate an episode to it rather than just cram them in at the end of another episode, because this was stuff we're probably going to waffle on about quite extensively here.
Oh, yes, there's some waffling in store, I think. There's definitely some waffling in store. Yeah. Before we do get into our delving, though, I just wanted to mention a news item that cropped up this week. And I think I'm right in saying this, but it has now been officially announced that St. Joshi is working on a bio of Clark Ashton Smith. Obviously, I would imagine that's going to be along the lines of I Am Providence, his Lovecraft bio. So I'm sure we'll all be very interested to see that. And, that's something in future we could certainly be devoting at least one episode to, I would imagine, if not more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see Smith getting a bit more attention, because for a long time it was only Lovecraft, wasn't it? And now it seems that people are sort of branching out a bit into the wider circle and beyond. So there's hope for us yet, Poynton.
There's hope for us yet. Our work here is, it's bearing fruit. It's strange, purpular fruit, but, vast swollen bowls hanging from... It's Smithian fruit. Let's leave it like that.
Smithian fruit, yeah.
Okay, and our first message is from Mark Griffin, which will be a familiar name to regular listeners because, of course, Mark and David Guffey and Richard Wilson are our friends from 30 Plus Minutes with H.P. Lovecraft podcast, and they've guested on the show a couple of times. I think they sat in on the Colossus of your Lawn, didn't they, in this season?
Indeed, yeah, and affectionately known as the Library Boys, because they sort of get together in the yellow back room of a library, which is very, very Robert W. Chambers.
Oh yeah, it's quite an amazing backdrop they've got there, the yellow library. Yeah. So Mark writes, glad to hear that Colossus of your Lawn is a bingo. That's referring to Niels Hedgelin's Strange Shadows bingo, which we may be mentioning later on, of course. According to Brave New Words, the Oxford Dictionary of Science Fiction and other sources, Hugo Gernsback started using scientifiction in 1915 in the opening paragraph of Thought Transmission on Mars, which was part of his Baron Munchausen's scientific adventures. So this is referencing this term that we often use and that Smith and Lovecraft used of writing scientifiction stories. And, we'll get onto the pronunciation in a little bit. Mark continues, the word would not appear again until almost a decade later when Gernsback attempted to start a magazine in 1924 titled Scientifiction. The word shows up through the decades afterward. Though commonly associated with Gernsback, it was written by others, most notably Lovecraft. By 1951, the term died away. The last known usage was in a letter to the editor of Marvel Science Stories, in which Malcolm Gibbs of Oswego, NY, asked, first, why should scientifiction magazines publish only scientifiction? Try pronouncing that. Whoever thought up that word anyway? Yes, indeed. I like a good fantasy story just as much as a space opera. Let's see yarns about vampires, ghouls, werewolves, and other assorted spooks, as well as ray guns, six-headed Martians, galactic wars, and warp drives. They're all impossible anyway. Who dares to disagree? Gibbs may reveal why the word never caught on. Just how does one pronounce it? Science fiction does flow off the tongue better. I love the way you strange shadow chaps say it, and if you two had been around then uttering it, scientifiction might have had a better chance. It did have a resurgence in 1994, but still it couldn't dethrone science fiction. So yeah, I think the only other way possibly to pronounce it is scientifiction. Scientifiction. It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it?
It is. I find it interesting that it was Hugo the Rat that coined it, because that's the Gernsback. Hugo the Rat is a nickname given to him by Lovecraft and various other people due to his late payment on stories. So there you go. But yeah, interesting. I never knew it was Gernsback that came up with it.
No, that's quite odd, isn't it? And I suppose, in a way, one reason he came up for it, because that's then what he wanted to call his magazine. Although that was a little time after.
Uh-huh.
So then I wonder who first coined the term sci-fi, which is even easier, of course.
Mm.
And I always think, I don't know, as someone who was trained in graphic design, when you're coming up with titles and things like that, or even titles for stories, you want something that fits on a header.
Yes. Yes.
You've never done it, certainly, but I have had stories in as an editor that says the improbable adventures of the case of Monsieur Dubert in the lake region of blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you send in a story called Death in the Sewers. Great,
Yeah.
that's a title.
Yeah. But interesting enough, I did actually have that for the Musketeers versus Cthulhu anthology that I put together a couple of years ago. I did have a story in for that the title was basically a paragraph.
Wow.
And I ended up cutting it and putting half of it as a subtitle because I was editing it. So it was like The Beast of blah, 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 blah. And then it was an adventure in the wilderness of the thingamajig outside Paris. I can't remember what it was now, but yeah, there you go.
Which is quite nice, and that always takes me back to Blackadder and Cape and Capability and Nob and Nobility and all that kind of stuff, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, that was a very Georgian and early Victorian thing, wasn't it, to have these really long subtitles that were basically a paragraph explaining everything that happened in the story.
Yeah.
In which the woman goes out to a house and meets a strange man who turns into a penguin, you know.
And sometimes you see that on chapter headings as well, didn't you? That was a thing back then.
Yeah.
So science fiction to sci-fi. That seems quite a logical progression to me, and I'm not surprised science fiction or scientifiction never caught on. I think by all accounts it was Fritz Leiber who coined the term sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that's straightforward. That is exactly what's in the tin, and it's S&S, sword and sorcery.
Exactly. Yeah. I do find it interesting how things change, because for a long time fantasy was kind of an umbrella term for all of the like weird and speculative fiction. Whereas now you say fantasy to somebody, they think trolls and elves and Lord of the Rings, right? That's fantasy.
Yeah.
Whereas I dug this out earlier. It's a whocking great hardback from 1981 called Masters of Fantasy. Now you'd think picking that up, because actually my partner, Linda, bought that. She picked it up from a charity shop thinking it was going to be full of all that kind of stuff. And there is a couple of stories in there. There's Fritz Leiber in there and Robert E. Howard. But the rest of it is, I've ended up with it. Because it was edited by Terry Carr and Martin Greenback, and most of the stories come from like Weird Tales and the contemporaries of Weird Tales. I'll just read you a couple of the stories that are in this now. So bear in mind, this book is called Masters of Fantasy. The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. The Coming of the White Worm by Clark Ashton Smith.
Ooh.
They Bite by Anthony Boucher. Call Him Demon by Henry Kuttner. Demon by C.L. Moore. The Black Ferris, Ray Bradbury. And it goes on and on and on. The Hellbound Train by Robert Bloch. Yeah, not what you would say fantasy to somebody, you know? So I find that really strange how these terms change over time.
Well, I think also we're back to that thing now. Back then, I mean, you almost had fiction and non-fiction, didn't you? If you went into the library, it was fiction and non-fiction.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think maybe the paperback boom had a lot to do with that. If you think about it, if you're a greengrocer, you have your potatoes, then you have your carrots, right? You don't mix it all in together. And then I think as time went on, the same has happened with the music industry. So you used to have rock and roll, R&B, classical, and now you've got underground, backwoods, garage house, tree root vibe with a bit of dark storm overtones. You know, that's basically how I describe our sound.
But even the 80s, everything that wasn't mainstream was just lumped into indie.
Your indie charts, wasn't it?
Your indie chart. You had your indie chart, and if you went to HMV or R Price or any of those shops back then, right, it was like you had pop and indie, and all your stuff, like, you know, you'd go rummaging through and you'd find the Cramps next to, I don't know, some weird
orange juice or something.
Or some reggae stuff, or it was all lumped in together because it just wasn't mainstream.
Yeah, true. And now I think, well, certainly with music and with books, so it's not just fantasy, it's high fantasy.
Oh yeah.
Low fantasy, dark fantasy, urban fantasy,
grimdark.
Grimdark. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably more from the industry than from readers and fans.
I think it is. Yeah.
Because I think you tend to go for for me, I tend to go for authors first.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's a known name, right, so I know that person's work. Oh, they've got a new book out. Is your first thing, I suppose. And then I think maybe for me, genre, but more in terms of what is it about. Like, if it's a good vampire story, you've got my interest. Don't really care if it's a fantasy or a sci-fi or horror, but it's vampires, so I'm going to look at that.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Because the thing is, as well, there's a problem with this kind of pigeonholing, because then you have things like the book that I've got coming out in a few weeks. Where the hell do I put it? What the hell do I class it as?
Yeah.
Because it's a complete mashup of completely disparate styles. I to this day, I have no idea what I'm going to call it. It's a book.
Yeah. And I suppose one advantage of working with small press or self-publishing is you have a lot more say over that.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, I can't imagine either of us going to one of the big publishing houses and saying, we've got this story. Well, we're back to that elevator pitch again, aren't we, that we've spoken about before. You have to be able to describe your opus in like 6 words. Well, it's Alien meets The Evil Dead with a touch of Die Hard. You know, that's basically what you have to boil it down to, isn't it? To pitch it a sort of corporate interest kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. So if I was to do that with this, it would be Lovecraft meets Escape from New York and Mad Max and Hot Fuzz and Monty Python.
See, the last couple I just take as read from you anyway.
Oh, right. Yeah,
that's the Mendes touch.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you should write a book called Dial M for Mendes.
Oh, God. Nice.
So, anyway, in a roundabout way, this all got me thinking about Smith and Lovecraft, and I'm going to say science fiction or sci-fi because I can't be asked to say science fiction anymore, because I think there is a difference here between the two authors, in that Lovecraft was way more science fiction than Smith.
Yeah. But
well, there's going to be a fight.
No, because he was, in terms of, like, he was definitely more grounded science fiction and things like that. But he never did space battles and Captain Volmar.
That's very true.
You know,
yeah,
it's weird, isn't it?
This is where we get into my theory.
Oh, here we go.
So, well, first of all, I want to talk about Lovecraft's, really, to me, premier sci-fi work, which is At the Mountains of Madness.
Yeah.
And we know that Smith liked this. We know because Smith wrote a letter about it, and we know what that means, don't we?
Oh, nice. Do we get a return address?
We do. At the opening on Eros of the time vault that conducts upon former eons, when Eros was part of the major planet Antanoth, which revolved between Mars and Jupiter. Dear H. Pyle, your letter came just as I was on the point of writing you to express my appreciation of At the Mountains of Madness. The manuscript came from Wandry per schedule and has now been forwarded to Dwyer. I read the story twice, parts of it 3 or 4 times, and think it is one of your masterpieces. For my taste anyway, it is vastly superior to Poe's Antarctic opus, Arthur Gordon Pym. I'll never forget your description of that tremendous non-human architecture and the onrushing Shoggoth in an underworld cavern. Wright's rejection was certainly a piece of triple-dyed and quadruple-plated lunacy, and that's early August 1931.
I can read that again. That's amazing. I'm nicking that.
Wright's rejection was certainly a piece of triple-dyed and quadruple-plated lunacy.
Triple-dyed, quadruple-plated lunacy. Oh, I love it. That's amazing.
Because, of course, as we know, as Wright often did, that was a rejection. Well, I think he rejected Lovecraft less than Smith, but even so.
Yes, yeah. Why would you? I mean, yeah. I mean, the only real reason I could see why you would reject mountains is length.
Yeah.
You know, that, but even then you can serialize it, can't you?
Well, exactly, like a Reanimator or something, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Although Reanimator was sort of written to be serialized, wasn't it? That very much comes across in its structure.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas at the Mountains of Madness basically is a scientific report. The way that it's written is as a scientific report.
Yes.
Which again points to this idea of Lovecraft being the more science-minded of the two of them.
He was, because we know he read a lot of scientific journals and things like that. I mean, you've only got to look at some of his other stuff to see that, you know, there's a lot of what were big advancements at the time, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the way it's written, because it starts off, it's kind of like the minutiae of this survey thing, isn't it? It's like, oh, we drilled down a certain amount and we pulled out some samples and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, it's an incredibly effective way of doing it.
Yeah, well, and yeah, like you say, Lovecraft in his stories, we've got astronomy, we've got physics, we've got geology, we've got all these things coming in. Now, just before that, Lovecraft had written to Smith, and I just want to read this. It doesn't mention At the Mountains of Madness, but there's a little personal thing in here that I'd never seen before. And of course, it gives me another excuse to read a return address. Bell of Panath, hour of the opening of the underburrows. Dear Clark Ashton, not yet, despite the outward evidence of silence, hath the aeon-aged blasphemer H. Pyle fallen utterly a victim to Yog-Sothoth and the goat with 1,000 young. Reasons for lapsed correspondence are twofold. In primis, a crowded programme made worse by the perpetration of a new Antarctic novelette, some 30,000 to 35,000 words long, and entitled At the Mountains of Madness. And secondly, a fresh spell of bum sight in the left eye, which is even now turning me from cacography to the hated clicking of this damned machine-age spawn. I shall probably have to adopt, or rather re-adopt, the full-time wearing of glasses, which I managed to shake off in 1925. I hate the thought, though, for the cursed things irritate my ears and nose bridge beyond endurance.
Yeah, I feel that. That's why I stumbled around like Mr. Magoo for many, many years, because I do my head in glasses.
I thought that was interesting there, that we've just been talking about Lovecraft was up on new scientific advances and everything like that, but he still preferred the fountain pen to the typewriter. That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
So we know that Lovecraft, I think it's fair to say he was moving more towards this scientific or sci-fi approach in his stories as he went on. He was moving away from the Poe-esque approach of his earlier stories. Mm-hmm. And of course, we get this very famous paragraph as well. This was a letter to Farnsworth Wright, 5th of July 1927, from Lovecraft. All my tales are based on the fundamental premise that common human laws and interests and emotions have no validity or significance in the vast cosmos at large. To achieve the essence of real externality, whether of time or space or dimension, one must forget that such things as organic life, good and evil, love and hate, and all such local attributes of a negligible and temporary race called mankind have any existence at all. So that knocks us firmly out of the world where man and his beliefs are central, and, you know, the whole good versus evil idea of these opposing forces in the universe, and man is on the front line of that, because none of that exists.
No. Well, that's the cosmicism, right? So I think it's quite interesting, because as Lovecraft was moving more into scientific grounding and away from the more gothic trappings, Smith seemed to be going the other way.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't a fan of writing scientifiction stories, was he? We've discovered that through a lot of his correspondence, like with August Derleth and with Lovecraft, that he tends to have a dim view on his own science fiction work.
Yes, very true, I think. And I think what we have to remember with Smith is the pecuniary depletion, of course. Mark that off the bingo.
Uh-huh.
And if we look at the Stephen Barron's book, Clark Ashton Smith, A Critical Guide to the Man and His Work, then he mentions this and makes a point about this. The largest market for imaginative fiction in the 1930s was in the sci-fi magazines. Amazing Stories, Wonder Stories, and Astounding Stories. They all went out on a monthly basis. And, well, he says Smith's desire to enter this market was a natural one. Beyond purely financial considerations, his early poems had demonstrated his romantic interest in unearthly and extraterrestrial realms and flights through space. So I think that's true in Smith's early poetry. You get this mix of fantasy and astronomy.
Yes.
And we see that a lot in his work. Yes, they're set on other planets, but they're quite fantastic with the pH planets.
Yeah.
It's not like when they beam down in Star Trek, oh, the atmosphere is 80% oxygen and 10% cheese, and you know,
even the looks of them. I mean, I've described them before as 70s prog rock album covers.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what they conjure up, is these weird, unnatural colours and strangely twisted bowls of fungus, and, you know, a lot of it very phallic.
Oh yeah. That's one aspect, right? Yeah. But then we get to a common denominator, perhaps, with Lovecraft. Donald Sidney Fryer wrote in 1963. It was in the fanzine Amra, issue 23, January 63. He wrote a piece called "The Alleged Influence of Lord Dunsany on Clark Ashton Smith." And Sidney Fryer writes in that, through all three of Smith's early poetry collections runs the theme of what may be called the cosmic astronomic. This theme was undoubtedly suggested to Smith by the example of the poems of a similar nature by George Sterling. When Smith came to write in the 1930s what may nominally be termed science fiction, he was merely utilizing material he had handled 15 to 20 years earlier. So I think that's interesting, that in fantasy you get the slipping into the other world of the fairy or the fae, the liminal space and that sort of thing, which Smith uses a lot. But it's not the world of fae, it's Venus or it's Polaris or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, because it is like the classic magic mirror thing, right, a lot of the time. But it doesn't take you to Wonderland or Narnia or wherever. Like you say, it takes you to Jupiter, where you're being chased by a giant proto-Shoggoth, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's another thing they have in common, actually, is all of their creatures are physical entities.
Yeah.
I can't think of ghosts. I suppose we do get a little bit, was it the 13 skeletons?
Yes, yeah.
Maybe there's like phantoms, perhaps, kind of thing.
13 phantoms, yeah.
13 phantoms. But generally you get, like you say, it's a proto-Shoggoth, it's a spawn of Sarthoggua, it's a ghoul, it's a gug, it's a whatever.
The killer flower.
Yeah. And, of course, what you then get in Lovecraft, as it turns out, all of his creatures are extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
So again, going back to the Mountains of Madness, we get the crinoids of ancient Antarctica were above all doubt the originals of the fiendish elder myths, which things like the narcotic manuscripts and the Necronomicon affrightedly hint about. They were the great old ones that had filtered down from the stars when the earth was young. So basically, what we read about in the Necronomicon, although in those books of grimoires, they're sort of they're framed as supernatural entities. They're aliens. They're space aliens.
Yeah, I do think you're right about Lovecraft being the more science fiction writer of the two, but Smith did more of the stereotypical science fiction, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the Volmars and
that with your Voyages and your Star Trek and your all that kind of business. Yeah. So there's another one to cross off, Star Trek. There we go.
Oh yes, there we go.
And I'm just about to mention Doctor Who here.
Of course.
Because you meant there the crinoids. They brings to mind the Tom Baker serial, The Seeds of Doom, which is a riff on The Thing. The creatures in that are called the crinoids, and it's basically like a Triffid-like thing that takes over people, and there you go.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Stephen Behrens makes the point as well that Smith had 3 types of sci-fi story. The first is where he's writing to order.
Mm-hmm.
So we get things like Adventure in Futurity and Seedling of Mars we talked about as well, of course.
Yeah.
The second type is where he uses sci-fi as satire.
Yeah.
Stories like Mohun Loss is really making a point about something today, but it's set in the future. And I think then the third type, with things like Yo Vombis and those stories, it's a sci-fi story, but the science is really there to get you to that scene.
Yeah.
Really, the main sci-fi aspect of Yo Vombis is they're on Mars. That could be an Antarctic expedition.
Yeah.
They could be on an island around Java or something like that. But the whole point of the sci-fi bit is we're somewhere totally different. We're somewhere alien. We're encountering something we've never seen before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he doesn't then explain any of it away scientifically, does he?
No. Which I'm thankful for, because as I've mentioned many times, I can't be doing with that. The warp drive has this, that, and the other megatons of thrust, and yeah, get on with it.
Yeah, Smith just says it's got an ether drive and it's broken, so we have to crash land on Mercury.
Yeah, there you go. That's sort of sci-fi I can handle.
So, yeah, and I think that's something else we've spoken about a little bit before, certainly in relation to Robert E. Howard and his Serpent Men, who really set the scene for a whole load of conspiracy theories of more recent times. And with Lovecraft and his gods are ETs, well, who remembers Eric von Daniken and all that stuff in the 70s, right? So it is interesting, again, to me, how this pulp fiction, this ephemeral, non-literary look-down stuff has been so influential on our culture in so many different ways. Not necessarily good ones.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's fun to look back on that, isn't it? Just go, because I mean, I do that quite often. I'll be looking on the internet and somebody will say something, and I'm going, have you been reading Ambrose Bierce or something? And it's like
even just yesterday, I saw a post on one of the Lovecrafty forums. Someone was asking about the occult and the Necronomicon.
Oh, yeah.
And could they recommend occult books? A few people sort of pointed out, Lovecraft made all this up. He got most of his occult references from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and is a total materialist.
Yeah. Still the best story, the fact that was it Harvard? Is it Harvard?
Yeah.
That a student's actually put a reference card in Harvard for the Necronomicon.
Yeah, that's great, isn't
it?
Yeah. See, that gets into that Robert Anton Wilson kind of area, doesn't
absolutely,
it? Of people playing pranks.
Oh yeah,
the situationists and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So there we go. Those are some thoughts on Lovecraft and Smith as sci-fi writers. Something to be said for both of them. And it's something, we've read out before. We won't go over those letters again. There are letters, of course, between the two of both of them talking about this subject as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the upshot, is Lovecraft had an actual deep interest in science in its various forms. Smith was not, he saw it as a means to an end. It was useful maybe as a tool for setting for him, but he wasn't the least bit interested in scientific explanation or speculation, come to that.
Yeah, definitely. Right, yeah. So, yeah, thank you, Mark, for that. Before we move off from Mark's thing, he has a little bit at the bottom here, which I wanted to bring up because
I know
I wanted to bring this up because I mentioned the cinematic masterpiece that he references here. The red slag of Mars could be a John Carter porno, and that would make for a great double billing with Flesh Gordon. See, that's it. Well, as soon as you said it, red slag of Mars, I thought Flesh Gordon. There we go.
Great minds think alike. And that, of course, was a reference to something that Niels was speaking about last episode, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it was one of the other stories that was in that competition that Smith wrote Seed from. Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant stuff.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Righto, our next correspondence comes from Ralph Grasso, and he's got 3 separate questions for us here. A little bit of pop quiz time. So, number 1, what's the top location for a Smith story?
It's a tough one, isn't it? It is tough.
I think personally, I have a big fondness for Hyperborea. Mainly because of the old sleepy toad god. He's most active there.
Yeah. It's a very difficult choice because Averoigne is so rich.
Indeed. It's very evocative.
The Averoigne setting for me is generally Smith at his most baroque.
Yeah.
Though Zothique kind of touches on that as well. And of course, Zothique, we've got all the necromancy going on as well, which is always fun.
Indeed. And you've also got Sidonis as well.
Yeah, and well, Mars come to that. I mean, well, I suppose in that sense, there's Mars, Venus, Mercury.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to plump for Averoigne on that one.
I think I'm going to stick with Hyperborea for me.
Yeah.
I think that's purely because some of my favourite stories are set there.
Yeah.
Rather than anything else. Okay, so number 2, your favourite alien/monster or old one? Well, that's an easy one for me. It's Chthuhlhuh. I love him. He's brilliant.
It's got to be Thoggy.
Yeah,
it's got to be Thoggy.
Yeah,
in all his various manifestations. I think largely because he's I don't want to say the most human, but people have chats with him.
Yes,
in a way that Nyarlathotep, obviously from the Lovecraft side, is the one who has the most contact with the human race.
Yeah, and the King in Yellow as well.
Yeah, but Thoggy has that kind of, you get the impression, you're in his temple and were you thinking of stealing his gold? But if you could spin him a good yarn, he might let you go.
Yeah.
It's a bit cheeky, and it's a little bit woo. Yeah, definitely. Especially when you think of like the Seven Gaiuses, which is essentially he's just like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to eat you. Go and speak to Atlak Naka. Yeah. So there's that sardonic edge to Chthuhlhuh, I think.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, then you also get these manifestations like the Formless Spawn.
Indeed.
And we can speculate on crossovers with Shoggoths.
Yeah.
And things like Thog, who Conan fought in Slithering Shadow, that sort of stuff. So he does cross all 3 writers' works, I think, that one in particular.
Yeah. I mean, I've been asked this question many times on other podcasts and interviews. What's my favourite great old one? And I always go for Chthuhlhuh. There's something about it, and even down to the design. It's a beautiful design. It's like the statuette, that carving. I mean, it's tremendous, isn't it? I mean, you were using it as a profile picture for a while, weren't you?
I can neither confirm nor deny it. I am human.
It's great. This sort of part bat, part sloth, all toad. If you want to rip off RoboCop,
Yeah, and of course that was the sculpture that Smith sent to Lovecraft, right? That sat on his mantelpiece. I'm not sure whatever happened to that, and was the subject of quite a lengthy correspondence. It was mentioned in every letter, wasn't it, for a while?
Oh, for a while, yeah, because Lovecraft was sitting there dreaming up stories about this statuette, which is great. brilliant.
We'll go through those one day as a reading. We'll read all those extracts back to back. I think they're very entertaining.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah. Okay, finally he asks, is Smith your favourite of the big three in Weird Tales? So obviously that would be Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, and H.P. Lovecraft. Now that's a tough one.
That's the three legs of the stool, isn't it, basically?
It is. I don't think I can choose a favourite between the three. I don't think I can.
No, it's almost impossible to answer. I think if you said to me Desert Island and you could only take one, it would probably be Howard, I think.
I would probably be Lovecraft.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But if you ask me who's the best writer, absolutely it's Clark Ashton Smith.
Yeah. In terms of, well, again, it's sort of best at what, isn't it, in a sense?
Yeah, but in terms of like traditional language and structure.
Overall use of language and imagery and everything. Yeah, then certainly Smith, yeah. I can't help feeling there's like a fusion of the two. You've got Lovecraft at one end, who's well, let's push it to an extreme. Lovecraft is totally atmosphere.
Yes.
Howard is totally character.
Yes.
And Smith kind of oscillates between the two.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah.
So you because I think something we noticed in a couple of stories this season was there's some quite graphic violence, wasn't there, in Smith?
Oh, there was, yeah.
There was heads being split open and this kind of stuff.
I always go back to Death is an Elephant.
Oh, yes.
The scene the guy's head gets popped like a melon. It's like,
yeah.
You can hear it, can't you? It's grim.
So vividly written with Smith's language. I can't think in Lovecraft off the top of my head of anything particularly gory. Obviously, there's horrible stuff happens, and there's lots of squamousness, and there's lots of liquescent horrors. But I can't think of anyone getting their head cut off or. You know.
I think the most I can really, off the top of my head, I can think of would be Mountains. Would be this description of the massacre at the outpost,
at the camp, yeah.
At the camp, you know, the vivisection and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that would probably be the nearest. But even then, it's all hints rather than an intestine was hanging out here. It's not like Robert E. Howard, right? There's blood and gore all over everywhere, right?
You got people holding their guts in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And what is that? One of my favourite Conan quotes is, "I'll varnish this floor with your brains, you dog."
Nice, that's a good one.
But I'll tell you what that needs at the end of it, though. You bastard.
You bastard. Yeah. And varnish this floor with your brains, you bastard. There you go. Spot on.
Perfect. So, yeah, it is such a difficult choice. And I sometimes wonder if the three had worked together on something, what it would have come out like, or would it just have been a mess?
Yeah.
They were obviously exchanging ideas all the time. They obviously influenced each other. I don't know if that ever works. It's like if you get your two favourite groups and put them together as one group, does it sound like a mess? You know.
Well, how many supergroups have we heard that end up just disappearing up their own arsehole because it's just self-indulgence, right?
Yeah, it never really works, does it? That. Yeah.
No.
So yeah, very difficult question.
Yep. Well, thanks, Ralph. Thank you for that.
Our next correspondence is from A.T. Johnston. Referring back to our recent bonus episode where we covered some of the poems of Smith and also of W.H. Pugmire, who of course was very much influenced by Smith. And we rounded that episode out with a reading of a sonnet by Pugmire called Muse, which was really a dedication to Lovecraft. A.T. Johnson writes, "Well, I teared up a bit at that last reading. Thanks for this one, lads. And if you want more Baudelaire after you hit up the Smith translations on the Eldritch Dark, I recommend the Oxford edition of The Flowers of Evil, translated by James McGowan and with an outstanding introduction by Jonathan Culler. Ya, Pan, ya, shupapa."
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very poignant sonnet, that one. And, you know, it's one of those you have to take your time when you read it out kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very moving piece.
Yeah. It's interesting because we covered Smith's poem to Lovecraft as well in an earlier episode, didn't we? And they're very got sort of this similar energy,
Yes,
kind of thing to them, but very moving, very, very moving. Yeah, the Baudelaire translation reference there was Les Fleurs de Mal, a translation of, known as Anterior Life, which is really, really, really good. And at the time, I pulled up loads of other translations by other people. And Smith's was by far, for me, the best. But I'd be really intrigued to read the one mentioned here, because I do want to read more Baudelaire, because I'm really liking what I have read so far. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think when we were talking about that as well, we mentioned the name de Casseres, who was a correspondent of Smith. I did a little bit of research into that. This refers to Benjamin de Casseres, 1873 to 1945. He was an American journalist, essayist, and poet. His first major work was in 1915, entitled The Shadow Eater, which is a collection of poems described as metaphysical meteors, searching, cataclysmic, and rich in satire. His most well-known poem is entitled Moth Terror. Now, de Casseres was a friend of Samuel Loveman, obviously part of that circle. I don't think him and Smith ever met, but I believe they did correspond. Well, we know they corresponded. And he actually wrote a piece about Smith called Emperor of Shadows, which I believe is up on the Eldritch Dark website. Perhaps that's something we can read and have a look at one time. So, yeah, someone on the fringes of the Smith circle from the sounds of it, or maybe more than the fringes.
Now, wasn't he the one who was referenced in Fritz Leiber's Our Lady of Darkness as being part of the whole Sterling circle?
I think that must be the guy. Yeah.
That's just popped into my head now, because I'm pretty sure, isn't he the one who set the trap that was originally intended for Smith?
I think he was, yeah.
It's been a while since I've read it. We covered it way back when on the Innsmouth Book Club, didn't we?
Yes, it was. Yeah, excellent story. For those of you who haven't read it, it's Fritz Leiber. How would you describe it? It's like a sort of haunted San Francisco, isn't it? But
cosmically haunted.
Yeah, cosmically haunted.
Because it's elemental stuff, isn't it? It's all like geography, psychic geometry and geography, and it's a hard one to describe, but it's one of my favorite horror novels of all time.
Yeah.
Some beautifully unsettling scenes. The bit where he's on the hill and he looks back at his window and there's that thing waving at him
from his own window. Yeah, it's very chilling. Yeah, I'll put a link up to the episode in the show notes below. Just speaking of Smith and poetry and the translations of Baudelaire, I was just looking at today. There's a 3-volume set of the complete poetry and translations of Smith. Volume 3 is called The Flowers of Evil. This was put out by Hippocampus Press in 2007, and it's edited by S.T. Joshi and David Schultz. Now, the cheapest I've been able to find one volume is about 25 quid. There's all 3 volumes going on one site for 400.
Blimey.
I don't know why they gold-plated those ones signed by Smith. God knows what. But yeah, I mean, that is obviously on the want list.
Yes, absolutely.
A full collection of Smith poems and the translations. So maybe as and when, as funds allow, I'll be getting 1 or 2 or all 3 of those at some point. But not this month.
No, I think I'm definitely going to have to pick up the Baudelaire translations, because I've got quite a lot of the poetry and various other things. Because there's quite a nice selection, which is what I've been going off when we've done this in the Penguin Classics, Clark Ashton Smith, The Dark Eidolon, and Other Fantasies. There's quite a good selection of his poems in the back of that.
Yeah.
And in various other bits and pieces like Chaosium's Book of Ibon and Clark Ashton's Cycle and things like that. There's poems here, there, and everywhere. But I really want to get my hands on the Baudelaire translations.
Yeah. And of course, you can get a lot of the poems on the Eldritch Dark website as well.
Indeed.
It's having a book in your hand is so much nicer than scrolling down the screen.
Yeah, I don't like reading things on screens. No, I'll put up with my Kindle if I'm away from home and I can't, if I've not got much to pack, much space. But I can't like night after night, I don't want to sit there with a screen, you know. I've been looking at a screen all day.
Exactly. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. You can, I think, still get them direct from Hippocampus. So I'll put that link up in the notes below as well. So you can get the 3 of them for $75, but it is then $50 shipping to the UK.
I was going to say,
because the postal system at the moment is absolutely prohibitive. Anyone out there who runs a mail order business, as we both kind of have been involved in, you know, you're screwed, aren't you, at the moment?
Well, I was talking to a mate of mine in a band over in Sweden the other day, and he's on about sending me the CD. And I'm like, right, I'll have to sort out the customs charge and things like that when it turns up. It's like,
and you don't know what it's going to be, right? Because of the B word and all that.
Yeah. It's mental, isn't it?
Yes, we won't even get into tariffs. There's no tariffs on Mars.
Not yet. Not until he gets up there, right? So life on Mars, there might be soon, and we don't want it up there. Anyway.
So yes, thanks for that, A.T. Johnston. That's a very poignant poem, and I'm glad you enjoyed the reading.
Our next one is a comment on an old episode now from back in season 1, episode 8. When we covered The Tale of Satampra Zeros. The comment comes from Rambam 3000. I love that. That's a great handle, isn't it?
It's great, isn't it?
That's almost like a handle you used to get on like CB radio, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Rubber duck.
You know? Yeah. All that kind of stuff.
Rambam 3000.
It's great. You'll see it popping up as Smokey and the Bandit.
I thought perhaps it sounds like a sort of futuristic sort of sports car or something. I've got the Rambam 3000, you know. Yeah,
nice. Yeah. Or a futuristic sex aid.
I wasn't going to go there, but
you knew I would. Rambam writes, an excellent episode, and I really appreciate the mix of humour and erudition. But can you check your text? According to the text I have, the Fantasy Masterworks Emperor of Dreams collection from Millennium Press, it reads, we had between us exactly 3 pesures, enough to buy a large bottle of pomegranate wine or 2 loaves of bread, hence the argument in the first place. Also, purpureal comes from purpure, which is the French, and therefore also the heraldic term for purple.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Right. That was, definitely one of our favourite words, wasn't it? Purpureal.
It's a great word. Yeah.
So, we're working from the Nightshade Press editions, edited by the late Scott Connors and Ron Hilger. And we have in there, we stopped to count our available resources and found that we had between us exactly 3 pesures, enough to buy a large bottle of pomegranate wine or 2 loaves of bread. We debated the problem of expenditure.
So it looks like the text is pretty much the same.
So, and as far as I know, these are the complete texts as Smith wrote them from what, from reading the book. And again, we can't recommend this collection highly enough.
Yes. Yeah.
All of Smith's fiction in chronological order, complete with introduction by various people at the start of each volume and those extensive notes at the back on the publication history of each story as well.
Yeah, cool.
So thank you for that, Rambam 3000. It's always interesting to see sometimes where changes are made. And again, that was something we were speaking about recently, wasn't it? About some of the editors were rather prone to just changing texts here and there, even changing titles sometimes without any consultation.
Yeah, that was the big one, wasn't it? The title changed without any, is that all right?
Yeah.
Or even just a heads up, because Smith didn't find out until it got printed. So that's cheeky.
I mean, imagine that if you sent in a story, Life on Mars. I know it's been done, but and you know what it's like. You get the book. Oh, and you look through the contents list. And my story's not there.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, they changed the title. Yeah, you'd be a bit miffed, wouldn't you?
I have been missed off a contents list.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've actually got that edition of the anthology. It got fixed. The story was in there, but it wasn't listed.
Yeah. That's a bit of an oversight.
It was a bit of a cock up. Yeah, it wasn't just me either. There was somebody else was missed out as well. So that they hadn't proofed. They'd proofed the rest of the book, but not the contents list.
I can kind of see how that happens because when I'm putting a collection together, I tend to put that title page in first as a reference to myself.
And then if you move something around, and forget to move it or forget to you delete it and forget to put it back in, I can see how it's easily done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that confused the crap out of me to begin with, because the first I saw of that was when it came up on Amazon.
All right.
And you look at the free sample and you got the contents list. I was like, where the bloody hell is it? So I contacted them and said, have you forgot to put it in?
Oh, no.
And they were like, no, it's in there. It starts on page blah, 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 blah. And I was like, right, you've just missed my name off the thing.
Yeah.
Because I was still on the back. I was listed on the back, but not on the contents thing.
Well, at least the story was in there, I suppose. But yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And someone said the other day that they've just got a new book out and they opened it. Page 3.
Typo. Yeah.
With 2 H's.
Oh, yeah. Every time.
It's such a strange thing, that, isn't it? So,
yeah.
I wonder, I know Tolkien had that problem. I mean, proofreading Tolkien,
oh, God.
And Azor of Gundabad slew the dragon of Thurmanderhound with the sword Beltharion.
I do often wonder, right, with things like that, and even Lovecraft with some of his, spellings of his great old ones, how many of them are actually typos? They were supposed to be something else, but then they got it. Because you know how it happens. I've done it myself. I've written it one way, and then I've written it another way, and then the other way is kind of stuck.
Well, you're talking to a man who spelled Chthuhlhuh wrong recently.
Did you?
Yeah. I finished. Those of you who've seen my Dragon's Teeth YouTube channel, my gaming channel, I got a very nice figure from XWC Miniatures of a star spawn of Chthuhlhuh.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it stands about. I guess it's about 10 centimeters high. Well, I finished painting it up and I did a 2-part piece on it for the video channel. And the first one was, the second one was called Star Spawn of Chthuhlhuh, part 2. The first one was Star Spawn of I got an H in entirely the wrong place.
Chthuhlhuh. I've got an image now of Cthulhu in a grass hula skirt trying to do the limbo.
Oh dear, how low can you go? So yeah, I mean the good thing, of course, with that is no one can pronounce it anyway, so it doesn't really matter how you spell it, does it?
Exactly.
Some people did Lovecraft even spell it? There was like a CTHLOO or something.
Oh yeah. And Chthuhlhuh as well.
Chthuhlhuh, yeah.
Chthuhlhuh, yeah.
Cthulhu's thousands of them.
There's a mashup waiting to happen.
Yeah. Well, I did run a fantasy battle scenario called Orcs Drift at one time, but that was
Orcs Drift. I love it.
So there we go. I think there's just one thing to finish with. We were having a discussion about the name Haldane a couple of episodes back.
Yep.
And we were both sort of racking our brains and trying to think, was there a Haldane? And, well, we were kind of right, kind of wrong, because we were thinking of, or at least I was getting it wrong, thinking of a Haldane in City of the Singing Flame. Of course, it's Hastane in City of the Singing Flame. But in my defence, in the Nameless Offspring, there's a Chaldane. Haldane with a C at the start.
Yes.
So... it was rattling around in my brain somewhere. There's a lot of space in there for things to rattle around in. So
I do wonder if the some of that comes from Bierce, because it's very close to Haster and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's because I mean I've speculated on this before. There seems to be quite a few Ambrose Bierce Easter eggs, especially in the earlier stories. Because that was at the time when Smith and Loveman were speculating about Bierce sightings and the fact that he was off living as a jaguar priest in a temple and all this kind of stuff, which is great.
Last scene with Elvis in Indonesia or something.
Yeah, I think I covered some of the letters on that in one of the first special episodes we did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So there we go, folks. Thanks very much for listening today, and thanks for listening to this whole season. We've had a lot of fun this time. I think, as we said last time with Nils, this season had, I think, the highest percentage so far of top-rate Smith stories.
Mm.
And I think, really, aside from Seedling from Mars, I think for both of us that was the least favourite, but we know why.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Everything else in this book really crackled, particularly the Colossus and Vombis and,
Yeah, no, I could completely agree. But saying that, even Seedling had moments, right? I mean, even some of the passages in it were really good. They were Smith. It's just...
Well, the worst Smith is still better than the best.
Exactly.
Well, we won't mention any names, but,
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to be taking a short break for a couple of episodes. If we get a chance, we'll put a reading or two up in the meantime. But we're going to gather ourselves. We're going to start our preparations for Season 4. And Volume 4 of the Collected Fantasies is entitled The Maze of the Enchanter and contains 19 stories, including The Beast of Averoigne, one of my personal favourites, The Disinterment of Venus, The Isle of the Torturers, The Dweller in the Gulf. That's a great one.
Absolutely.
Genius Loci, which is the first Smith story I ever read. So I've got a little story about that one.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's cool.
The Charnel God, The Dark Eidolon, Volthume. The Weaver in the Vaults. Some real classics coming up next season as well. And I see the introduction to that volume is by Gahan Wilson, the artist.
Yeah, who did the introduction on this one this season? Hang on. Of course it was Ramsey Campbell. Of course it was.
Speaking of which.
Indeed. That was a nice little segue.
Well, that was almost like it was planned, sir. Well done. Yeah, that was a happy accident, wasn't it?
Serendipity.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Ramsey is at the top of our list here of people we want to thank. Well, we've got a few lists here, but let's start with our readers this season, which include Ramsey Campbell, James Lovegrove, Shelley de Cruz, James Conrad, CJ Hooper, Matthew Wood, Nigel Watson, David Cartwright, Gavin Chappell, Alexandra Beaumont, John Chthuhlhuh, Peter Laws, and Steph Hoyle. Thanks one and all for your excellent readings.
Indeed. Yeah, we also want to thank people who have come on and joined us for an episode. So we'd like to thank our Auburn correspondent, Nils Hedgelin, David D. Perlmutter, and our friends from 30 Minutes with HPL podcast, David Guffey, Richard Wilson, and Mark Griffin.
And last but not least, of course, we'd like to thank our lovely patrons and subscribers and backers of the show who really do allow us to continue with the podcast. So a huge thanks to Liam Spinarge, Martin Thorison, Dominic Allen, Uric De Vetta, Mark Jenkins, A.T. Johnson, Gary Pennington, Brett Kramer, Aaron Vleck, Steve Meyer, Wingate Stites, Russell Journey, Justin Woodman, Lee Clark-Zumper, Stuart Price, Alan Brignall,
Mitch Keith, Lee Williams, Ekaterina Sureva, Alden, Ralph Grasso, Greg Benedicto, David A. Riley, Jacob King, Coman, Steve Grant, and Fred Keisha.
Thank you very much, one and all, for your continued support. And if you would like to join them, then just check out our Patreon site, of course, for details of how to sign up, which will get you access to all our bonus content. You'll get your quarterly copy of Innsmouth News on a PDF, and, of course, free entry to the Innsmouth Literary Festival and any other events that we may or may not be organising. Speaking of which, in case you missed it last time, Nils Hedgelin mentioned that he's organising a Smithian event in Auburn later this year. So keep an eye out for that, of course. We'll be putting all the details up as soon as we get them from Nils. Okay, well, with that, thanks again for joining us this season. We'll see you in a few weeks' time. Have a great summer. It's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.